couple studies that have actually been done on fiber. Anytime they removed it out of the diets of constipated patients, their constipation actually went away. So why don't you ever hear about that in like the common news media? It seems like fiber is always suggested to help your digestive system when actually removing it helps it.
The carnivore diet. Eat meat, drink water, no vegetables, fruits, or carbs. The carnivore diet is reaching fad cult-like status as a nutritional strategy that some swear by and many wave off as unscientific and unsafe. As your humble podcast host and self-experimenter, I decided to eat carnivore for 3 weeks to get some first-hand experience and talk to some of the folks in the fast-growing online communities revolving around carnivory. Travis Statham, our carnivorous guest today, moderates and hosts some of the largest well-known carnivory groups, including the Facebook group World Carnivore Tribe and the subreddit r/zerocarb. Before he went carnivore, he was keto for more than 5 years. Travis and I discuss why he believes that fiber from vegetables aren't essential for human health, how to get nutrients when eating carnivore, and theories on human evolution. If you're tuning in via audio, remember to hit that subscribe button for weekly episodes. For folks on YouTube, please subscribe and hit that bell to enable post notifications. Without further ado, let's get right to it. Travis, thanks for coming by the HQ at HVMN.
Yeah, thank you. I was in town this week for a work project and all worked out.
I want to get into carnivory, but before we move on to that topic, I mean, we should just talk a little bit about the history and the development of ketogenic diets, right? And I think you mentioned that originally the most popular use case around 150 years ago was treating drug-resistant epileptic children. And it sounds like the use cases have really expanded from there. And perhaps useful for the audience here to just give a sense of my background. I personally cycle in and out of a ketogenic diet, where on some days, some periods of time I will eat carbs, and especially when I'm doing more endurance exercises. It's not because I'm like skeptical of long-term sustained ketosis. It's more of a lifestyle and just shifting my goals for certain types of outcomes. And I think within like the broader HVMN community, there's a lot of people interested in fasting and low carb diets. And I guess like the way I approached ketogenic diets was coming through fasting actually.
Yeah, right.
So I started doing intermittent fasting, so fasting for 36, 60 hours. And one of the endpoints of fasting is raising my ketone levels, right? Because you're basically plowing through your glycogen reserves, turning ketones.
Switching metabolic states.
Yes. And my interest in ketogenic diets occurred when I was like, okay, like, can you almost get the best of both or get, double down the benefits of fasting, right?
Yeah.
You can't fast forever. That's called starving, you die.
Right.
But can I compound the benefits of being in a state of ketosis through stacking a fasted state with a ketogenic diet and then cycling in and out of that? So I would say that I think for a lot of these disease or therapeutic uses, there's like a lot of potential with ketogenic diets. Like I think Vertihealth is doing a really good job just showing RCT data on, or I guess it's not necessarily RCT, but like open labeled studies. But like they are reducing hemoglobin 1A A1C numbers, or reducing the need for insulin. So like that's being published. That's like real work there.
Right.
I think there's emerging data on it can be useful for glucose or insulin control of type 1s. I think you mentioned cancer. I think there should be a disclosure that some forms of cancers do use fat as a source of energy. So if you have that type of cancer,
the cancer discussion is complicated.
Right, right. Like
it's not just do keto. There's a bunch of other conditions.
Yeah, so exactly. I hope we can like tease out some of these nuances, not just provide like a blanket statement on just cancer, which is a very complicated, multifaceted disease that has been intractable and killing a lot of people. So it's a very serious disease. But I think the nuance there is that a lot of cancer tumors are very glycolytic, use glucose as energy.
And glutamine.
So, right.
Which is an amino acid, I think.
Yeah, amino acid. So it stands the reason that if you shut down the availability of glucose. You can suppress tumor growth. And I think there is some animal work, and I know that Dom D'Agostino and Tom Seedfried are doing good work in that area.
That's who I know the most.
Yeah.
There's also Eugene Fine and Dr. Richard David Feynman in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I actually met
physicist.
Dr. Feynman. Yeah.
Okay.
Like 6 months ago or something.
Okay.
I'm
curious. So he's using ketogenic diet.
Yeah, they're trying to do like a small study where I think they have people on who have cancer do keto, and I'm not really sure what their outcomes are.
Okay.
But yeah, they have there's like an experiment.com website or something where you can kind of run like a crowdfunded science research. And they had like an anonymous investor like put a bunch of money in towards them. So
yeah, it's a question worth understanding, right? Like I think if people are seeing I know a lot of our community members are just doing it. I mean, it's basically based on mechanism that are just treating themselves. They're eating keto, and then of course they're doing chemotherapy and the standard practice. Yeah. And it seems like it's working for them, right? So, but I think the caveat is that there are I think some forms of brain cancers, glioblastomas, that do use fat or ketones as fuel. So
if you have that form, GBMs are the best to cure.
Okay.
With cancer, with keto.
Okay. I think there might be some subtleties where there's some glioblastomas are very amenable towards the ketogenic diet. But I believe some cancers, including brain cancers, do use fat as fuel. So you don't want to sort of pour the other fuel on that fire.
Did you hear Tom Seedfried's recent or maybe Dom's podcast on Peter Attia's show?
Yeah.
He talked about how he originally created a hyperbaric chamber and could measure I guess cells in hyperbaric oxygen chambers and see how they reacted. Yeah. And then he ended up calling Tom and was like, "Hey, I think I just figured out how to kill cancer cells just using hyperbaric oxygen." Yeah. And Tom has posted a article called Press Pulse.
Yep. It's just stacking ketogenic diet, hyperbaric oxygen therapy
with some drugs that block glutamine. Yeah. And basically the ketones protect your cells from damage, and then the lowered glucose state kills the cancer. Right. And then I guess
and your healthy cells are using ketones as energy. Right. And so then the oxygen also is is antithetical to
somehow they're destroying the cancer cells, and then they just you can do this therapy twice a week, and it just
I'm personally interested also just from a business perspective around something like ketone esters, right? We can just jack up your ketone levels really quickly and acutely. So obviously a lot of work still to be done just on Press Pulse and all these therapies, but if ketone esters can play a role in that would be interesting to understand.
Yeah, right.
What else? I think there's interesting work with ketogenic diets with Alzheimer's and dementia. Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about in this program, Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. Mm-hmm. What other disease states where there's potential? There's animal work showing increase in longevity. This was in the Buck Institute. A cyclical ketogenic diet was extending lifespan on mice. Mm-hmm. Those seem to be pretty, obviously just important, pernicious diseases that are facing the country. Yeah. Obesity, metabolic syndrome, you're talking about that. Anything else in terms of just hot spots that, it sounds like you have this whole list out. Anything else we're missing here?
Amy Berger just posted a article about gout, and then I cross-posted it into the Reddit, our gout community today, and they all hate it. You can't tell us to change our diets. It's all genetics and stuff. And it's I think the biggest problem with the keto idea is that everyone calls it a fad diet, a brand new thing. And therefore they think it's, they basically bring it down before they even really think about what it means. Right. And I just think so many of our chronic diseases are caused by metabolic issues. Just burning sugar for 50 years. Yeah. It's just not healthy. The real question is what do we evolve on? what diet did humans like get to this point? Like how did they eat? And it's pretty obvious. Like you look at any factory or any standard American diet today, and you see that everyone is eating tons of processed carbs and grains and sugar and seed oils and fruits and vegetables that didn't even exist like 100 years ago. So I'm not really sure like why that advice is being pushed as like the healthy, diligent advice to follow.
Right.
If it's like pretty obvious it didn't exist like 100 years ago. Like
I think that's an interesting sociological observation. And perhaps this, I'm overweight on this being based in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, but it seems that there are more and more people with not formal nutrition or physiology backgrounds, but folks coming in from the mathematics or physics or computer engineering perspective. And that's my background. I'm a computer scientist by background. And I believe you're a computer engineer as well, right?
Yeah.
Where folks cut from our cloth are applying our engineering training and our systems thinking or systems engineering approach towards humans.
Just being critical thinking and approaching it as if like we have no foreknowledge.
Right.
And I think nutritionists and dietitians and doctors, they've all been taught like these flawed paradigms that weren't really based in fact. And if you talk to most of them today, they all push like very plant heavy diets with lots of carbs. They still think like the brain needs 130 grams of carbs a day.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what happens if you like don't eat for 3 days? Do you just die? Like, no. Like anybody on Naked and Afraid,
right?
Yeah, anyone on Naked and Afraid doesn't die in 3 weeks while eating one snake. It's you don't need carbs for any. They're not essential.
I don't want to make enemies with nutritionists and doctors. I think there are a lot of good people in these professions that are leading at the forefront, like Jason Fung, like we had Dr. Priyanka Wali, who's a San Francisco-based clinician who's also helping prescribing ketogenic diet. So I think hopefully we do good work on the community and the grassroots side, and we also have more and more people from the medical community come on board as well. And I think we need that 1-2 punch together.
I do want to get more doctors. I'm just saying like everyone defers to the old advice, and then it all makes it seem like keto diets are unhealthy. Like, they have tons of saturated fat, and we all know that clogs your arteries. And I'm like, saturated fat isn't even like solid at 98 degrees. Like, how could it clog your arteries? Like, makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, some of these old hypotheses are getting knocked down. I'm sure you've followed some of Dave Feldman's work with the LDL.
Cholesterol code,
Yeah, check out cholesterolcode.com. I think it helps demystify some of the, I would say, the conflation or the associations with LDL that don't really net out to something that's causative. So like that stuff. So I personally agree with kind of that philosophy now in terms of lipids, that LDL in of itself is not an interesting biomarker for cardiovascular risk. I tend to look at triglycerides and HDL, and then inflammation like CRP, C-reactive protein, and then I mentioned insulin as like and blood glucose as that paints an overall picture of what I care about in terms of like understanding my blood lipids.
And then the granddaddy of them all, the CAC test.
Yeah.
Calcium artery coronary?
Yeah.
Coronary artery calcium. And that's been pushed a lot by Ivor Cummins.
Fat Emperor.
Yes. Yeah. And Jeffrey Gerber.
Yeah.
They wrote a new book called Eat Rich, Live Long.
Yeah.
Came out this winter.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be more of a causative effect there rather than kind of these epidemiology studies that are just...
Oh my gosh. And we dealt with this like 2 weeks ago, or like a week ago.
Yeah.
That low carb mortality study came out, epidemiology, and they split everyone up into groups by how many carbs they ate, and then found these teeny tiny little hazard ratios that are like too small to really show you anything.
Right.
And they're like actually saying that like low carb causes all these problems.
Right.
It's like, that's epidemiology. You can't make causation statements out of that.
By definition, you can only make correlations or association claims.
And then like, how can you explain how like almost every like time a ketogenic diet is actually tested, it does way better than the low fat diet.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a lot, and I think we can get really into the weeds here, but I want to kind of take this back into carnivore diet. So I think you were mentioning a little bit about how, look at the foods that humans ate as we evolved. And this is something that I've been experimenting with personally, hearing a lot of interesting anecdotes of people having success with carnivore diets. I think just today, I think we were just on Twitter, people kind of making fun of Michaela Peterson around eating carnivore diet. It's kind of random why she's I don't know, random, not random, but like it's kind of like we kind of were known as like a fasting advocate, and it's kind of random that we, we're kind of the thought leaders here, or why you're, kind of, at the forefront of talking about keto and carnivore. We sometimes find ourselves in these positions, and we do what we try to do the best we can with the platform that we have. There's something in the waters here where this is hitting some nerve. Let's unpack that. Okay. And maybe the first place to start is, how did you personally get into carnivory?
I was, posting Reddit, or I found Dr. Sean Baker on YouTube last August. And he was talking about his N equals many study. And he was basically saying, we have this website, we can have people try 90-day carnivore experiments and log their own data and then create our own science through it. And I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. If we're going to do food frequency questionnaires through Harvard, why not just give you an online app that lets you do your own food frequency? I mean, all these people already track everything they eat in MyFitnessPal and all these diet apps. Why can't we turn that into data?
That's probably better data. Have you seen the food questionnaires that the Harvard's
did? They're terrible. And
it's ridiculous how bad it is. It's
yeah.
What did you how many times did you eat chocolate in the last month? Once or twice, 3 or 4? It's I don't even know what I ate yesterday.
And there's so many things what kind of chocolate, how much sugar was in it.
Yeah. So I think if you look at the baseline question, you're how the hell do you make any conclusion from this really, really coarse data set? And
the bias is also shown a lot too. If they start saying how much saturated fat stuff did you eat, and they kind of make it seem like it's a bad thing,
right?
And people might put less.
Even if you don't know, I don't even know what saturated fat unless you're tracking this, right?
Right.
And it's hard to track, and I think it's well known that I think it's been shown that you don't know how much you're eating unless you're weighing it out. It's hard to eyeball these things.
Or that low carb mortality study, they calculated it out, and everyone apparently was eating 1,600 calories a day.
Right.
Which is a starvation diet that doesn't work if you give it to men for 6 months. They go crazy.
Right.
So obviously that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I really wish we could get away from epidemiology, but I really think it's been used basically as a way to prop up industry, to prop up marketing. And basically these, big food has basically been well, if we create a study that tells everyone what they want to, what we want them to hear, then they'll buy our products because they think it's healthy.
Someone said something that I think reflects well. It's kind of a Ouija board where it's just
right.
You can interpret statistics, right? What's the other saying that you can always there's lies in statistics, right? I mean, I think clearly there's probably, I don't want to diss epidemiologists too hard here. I mean, there's probably some value that you can get out of the work, but let's make sure that we're not over extrapolating the data, right? I think it's probably a safe thing to say.
Well,
and let's educate people around let's not have the mass media just spin a low confidence epidemiology study into hey, low carbs killing you. I think that's where it gets really, really out of
people
bed.
Don't know how to read science, so they see epidemiology and they're like, oh wow, this is pure proof. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you're just looking or you're just reading it and you're like, oh, these people were studied and they didn't eat that many carbs and they died. It makes sense. And then I can extrapolate that into keto with a no carb diet.
Right.
But you were asking me about carnivory, right?
Yes.
So
before that detour there. Yeah, carnivory.
um,
So Sean Baker, N equals many.
yeah,
You thought that was interesting to collect data.
The first time I really like heard of people being carnivores, I was like, nah, like I think I should just say keto because I think it's like the safer
And you've
route.
already been doing keto for like 5-6 years solid.
And I was just like, I knew it was crazy. I knew it could get extreme. And I was like, I didn't want to embrace it. So I kind of like ignored it. Like Gary Taubes talks about Viljamar Stephenson, who went to the Arctic and lived with the Eskimos for 10 years. And he lived on an all meat diet over those 10 years for like a total of 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Taubes talks about that a little bit in his book. And I was like, so I've always known that that's possible, but I never really wanted to embrace it because I felt like that would
You felt extreme enough, and it's like, I don't need to put like,
and I felt like
ridiculous extreme.
the keto message wouldn't benefit that much from the more extreme side of like, oh, you should just eat meat.
Yeah.
But now I think I've changed my mind on that. I think it's almost better to push carnivore and then
interesting.
say like that. Then I don't have to get into like low carbs and ketones and like measuring percentages and all this stuff. Like macros, like protein.
Simpler
and fat.
message, you think?
Yeah, you could just like say eat fatty meat and drink water, and it's like that's it.
If it came from an animal, you can eat it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, forget about it.
Yeah, you can have eggs and cheese, and it seems like most people gravitate towards eating like beef or lamb.
Yeah.
And so like I always knew that was like the crazy thing, and I tried to prevent myself from getting there, and eventually I gave in and tried it. I was like, yeah, this is actually better. And
out of curiosity, you tried it, and it's like even better than how you felt on just standard keto.
Yeah, and
it'd be helpful for the audience, and also for all of our education here. Just what did you typically eat on a ketogenic diet, and then when you went full carnivorous, what did you cut out, or what did you add?
I mean, I just cut out like broccoli and salads and basically like any of like the green sides that you might get for lunch.
Okay, so you
or
so
like lettuce on like a burger wrapped. Like
okay, so when you're
like
eating
a bunless
keto,
burger,
you were doing some greens.
Yeah,
maybe you were sautéing with olive oil.
Right.
Okay.
Or like I would saute like an onion and peppers and then like in bacon fat. Like one of my favorite things. I do like vegetables. Don't get me wrong. Like I really do, and I think they do add lots of amazing taste to food.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced I need to eat them anymore, and I'm kind of curious whether they do more harm than good.
Okay.
I think if you start at that null hypothesis, you say like, how do we know for sure whether something's good or bad for us? And then like, if you just jump to the conclusion that it's good for us, you might skip over all the reasons it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the common nutrition advice of today has basically been saying, we want you to eat less junk food, and we think that meat is bad for you because of saturated fat and cholesterol. So the only thing that's left for you to eat is more fruits and vegetables. And that fiber and all that eating is going to keep you full all day. Mm-hmm. And I don't really think that's true. And I think eating plants introduces all these new chemicals into our body that we just haven't really evolved to handle yet.
Your argument there is that the modern vegetable is very, very different.
Modern vegetables, most of them come from wild mustard. Like one plant, like it's kind of like the wolf being turned into many different breeds of dogs, right? Yeah. It's the same.
Like the broccolini,
kale, Brussels sprouts.
Right, they're all the same plant.
Yeah, they're all the same plant, and it's just like, why do we need to eat like this one plant with many different types? Why is variety good?
Yeah, I think that's a good baseline. So, devil's advocate, a lot of the concerns when people eat a carnivore diet is your gut microbiome shifts. Do you need fiber to actually be able to poop? Clearly, if you've been eating carnivore for the last year, you can still poop and all of that.
No, I actually haven't gone in a year.
Maybe that's a fact I'd sign up for. I don't use the poop. That's kind of cool. So yeah, what is the response there? I mean, how do you engage on that side where the common engagement is, look, you need fibers, you need sort of the plant material to to allow your gut microbiome to flourish, and
So
that helps make a lot of micronutrients that your body needs.
Yeah, I think it's really like basically simple advice that seems to make sense if you think about it, but if you become a little critical of it, it kind of falls apart. So you think of fiber as just more bulk, and you're eating it, and then it's just kind of acting as like a, I don't know, like a bowling ball that goes through your gut and just pushes everything in front of it, and then like helps you stay regular in some way. But the couple studies that have actually been done on fiber, anytime they removed it out of the diets of constipated patients, their constipation actually went away. So why don't you ever hear about that in like the common news media? It seems like fiber is always suggested to help your digestive system when actually removing it helps it. So one of the most
from these studies.
Yeah. So one of the most influential guys that changed my mind on this, I always just assume fiber is healthy, and I just
I mean, that's generally how I think about it. I think that's generally how people think about it. Fiber, you can't have too much of it, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, if we didn't evolve eating it, then, and there's all these people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and IBS and all these digestive issues, and they're all being told to eat more fiber, and they're not getting better, then there's clearly something wrong with this advice. And the guy that changed my mind, he wrote this book called Fiber Menace. I actually have it in my hotel room right now. I read like a chapter and a half. And he also has a website called gutsense.org, where almost like the entire book is like on that website. His name is Konstantin Murnikowski or something.
So you're really pushing the argument that humans did not really evolve eating any fibrous or really plant material.
Right.
Your thesis is that we evolved as basically close to carnivores.
Yeah, and we only switch to omnivory if we're starving or if we have a famine. Eating plants, gathering them, very intensive. It takes a lot of work. Like digging out tubers might take a while, and then you get like this little starchy thing that you have to boil.
Yeah, I mean, you think of like the caloric density of
berries
these things,
only come into season for a week or two in the whole year. No one's living off of berries their whole life.
Right. And then primitive vegetables aren't these like nice, juicy.
Yeah. They're hard to eat. They get rotten. Bugs get in them. They might be high up on a tree. They might be hard to access. And then like when I asked like paleoanthropologists, like what plants did people eat?
Yeah.
And they don't really know. They just kind of say like some, because we've seen like
well, yeah, I mean, let's have a discussion here. I mean, you could say like, okay, like what do chimps eat? What do our closest animal relatives are monkeys, gorillas, chimps.
Yeah, but
they're eating
most recent common ancestor is probably 5 or 6 million years ago.
Right.
And chimps today eat 5% meat. They can, if they have access to lots of fruit, then they can basically spend the extra energy to do riskier hunting.
Right.
And I mean, I think like 40%, I don't know, not a super high percentage of their hunts are successful, but when they are, they basically tear a monkey in part and then eat it raw.
Right.
And it's like amazing to see. I've seen videos of, chimps like hunting monkeys in the trees, and it's like they use social communication, they plan it out a little bit. And it's like, I could understand how if you take this basic core set of hunting skills and extrapolate it back into humans, like we can plan really well. We can
so your argument is that the successful chimps are hunting and they're getting better and better at it, and the thesis is that humans were the next level, even better at social dynamics and hunting, and they're eating more and more meat.
That all basically came. Maybe like the hard part is the forests in Africa where like our pre-human ancestors evolved. It's hard for fossils to be fossilized there, for like pre-humans to be fossilized. So It's because like it's very moist and wet, and anything that falls to the ground is going to rot. So we don't have like a ton of fossil evidence to see like what early humans looked like. I think that we were probably some kind of ape human that ate mostly plants, and then were able to develop a small carnivory practice, and then basically the forests were dying out and the plains were coming in, and all these ruminant animals were living out on the plains, eating the grasses and being hunted by lions and giant predators. So I think these early humans left the forest and started scavenging these dead kills left behind by lions. Maybe they could bash open like a brain cavity and eat the brains out of
and
like
chase it with hyenas, basically out scavenge.
They could also maybe catch fish in like a dried up pool. They could get clams in the natural lakes there. And anytime you can add more protein to your diet and more fat, it's so much more energy than eating. And
it's definitely energy dense.
Glucose.
I don't think that's
And digesting fiber is a ton of work. It takes.
I mean, we can't digest fiber.
We can't digest fiber, but cows can, and gorillas can, and these animals have developed really specialized guts that are meant to really only eat plants. And we basically made a trade where we said, okay, we can now rely more on carnivory to get our food calories. And in doing so, we can use less energy on our own digestive system and more energy on our brains. And if you watch like any animal out there hunting, and you were on a safari, right?
Yeah, I was recently in Tanzania.
Carnivores aren't just fast and big and strong. They're also really cunning. They need to use intelligence. They need to sneak up on their prey. They need to get an ambush out. And all these skills mean they're really thinking like, what is their prey going to do when they see, the carnivore? Like, are they going to run away? Are they going to freeze?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, one thing that struck me on safaris, I was in Tanzania doing the northern circuit, going sort of seeing the Serengeti plains, was that if you're a ruminant, like a gazelle, elephant, giraffe, they're constantly eating. They like do not stop eating.
Oh yeah.
And it stands to reason because like that's one thing that just like really struck me. Like these are some of the biggest animals, like hippos. Elephants are massive.
Yeah.
But they're just eating like grass. And how do you produce so much mass from such like low density nutrition? I guess it's like you're eating all the time and digesting all the time.
And you're basically employing microbes in your gut to turn fiber
into
free fatty acids.
Right.
Actually, I think some ruminants are actually in ketosis themselves because they're generating so much fat from these microbes that they're not really
like lactating cows. When they're not milk,
burning,
for example, are in keto.
Yeah, and they're not really burning glucose. They're not eating like tons of fruit.
Well, I think that's one thing that you mentioned, which I think also applies to some of the skeptics here, which is that you mentioned that the fiber serves as a substrate for the microbiome or the gut flora to ferment and turn into micronutrients or fatty acids. And I think the argument is that, okay, if you have no fiber, you're killing off your microbiome flora. And there's more and more data showing that there's connections between the microbiome with the brain and other parts of your organs.
Yeah.
And you're putting your whole gut into disarray.
What's the response? I've always thought of like the microbiome as like the end of the digestive system, right? So like if we really needed plants and we really needed our microbiome, then like if you went on a meat-only diet, you should die basically pretty quickly. That's not the case for me. That's not the case with any of the other carnivores I know.
Yeah.
So really what happens is we have all certain types of bacteria and they thrive in different environments. So if you're eating lots of plants and lots of fiber, you'll have lots of bacteria that will be happy and munch on that kind of food. If you stop feeding them, they're going to say, okay, we don't have anything to eat, and then they're going to die.
And we're going to get replaced.
Yeah, and you're going to have to like excrete all that bacteria.
Yeah.
And then new bacteria is gonna come in and thrive in like your meat only like digestive waste.
Yeah.
And so this book I read, Fiber Menace, he talks about all kind of like how the digestive system works. I'll just kind of go through it because I think it's really interesting. So first of all, our teeth, because anytime you add grains or sugar to a human population, they get cavities. So the Eskimos had 0 cavities. Any pre-Western tribe that didn't eat grains or sugar had no cavities, and they were just eating meat. So I think that means that we evolved to have healthy teeth. Like, it doesn't make any sense to like die because you can't even chew anything or like eat anything.
You can make the argument that like, elephants don't really lose their teeth either if they're just eating carbs.
Yeah, but they've evolved to eat carbs, and they have a different kind of teeth that has adapted to that environment.
Okay, fair enough. Or I mean, could you make the argument that like it's refined sugars?
Or it's refined sugars. Yeah, like.
So I think it would be probably uncontroversial to say refined sugars.
Yes,
for sure, causing these caries and these cavities.
But fiber also ferments in your teeth too, and bacteria, I guess, release lactate acid, and that's what like dissolves your tooth enamel and gives you cavities. Okay. So that's the first part. Then you swallow your food and gets into your stomach. Your stomach basically churns your meal around for like 4 to 6 hours and turns it into this stuff called chyme, which is like a digested like paste of something. And your stomach has a pH of 1 or 1.5, super acidic. And they've done studies and they looked at all the other animals in the animal kingdom, and the most highest level carnivores have the lowest pH levels. So it makes you wonder if we have like
definitely some smoke. That's definitely some smoke. I wouldn't say it's like a smoking gun, but definitely some smoke.
And the other thing is like for us to maintain such a low pH, it's a lot of work for our body to do all the chemical reactions to maintain that state. It has to protect the rest of the stomach from the acid. It needs like a really good membranes. It's not something you just like. It's not like an accident, basically. There's a reason why we have a strong stomach. Right. And if we did evolve as scavengers that turned into big game hunters, it makes a lot of sense. Like, we lived on meat. We ate bones. We ate marrow. We ate rotting meat, high meat. And we liked it. Yeah. And so after the chyme gets digested, this duct opens up and it gets pushed into your lower intestine, and your gallbladder releases enzymes that digest the fat. Bile, right? And all that acid does a good job of killing any bacteria that were like on the plants. So, but it doesn't do. It also just like makes this meat paste into like, it turns meat into paste basically. And so like in the lower or the small intestine, it moves through, and there's like a cecum organ that is part of the small intestine, and it's super small and basically doesn't get used at all in our digestive system, whereas in herbivores that eat tons of fiber, it's like a super important organ.
That's where all the stuff ferments.
Yeah. There's like, it's like the first chamber of the digestive system. So if that's like very small, like why is that? The appendicitis or appendix doesn't get used anymore, and apparently. When kids have their appendix removed, it's because fiber has gotten inside of it and inflamed it and caused like a issue that causes it need to be removed.
Yeah.
So this book recommends like you should not feed fiber to your kids, and doing so gives them all sorts of digestive issues.
Wild.
And I mean, we still don't know what causes type 1 diabetes, right? It's an autoimmune issue.
Yeah.
What if eating fiber caused type 1 diabetes? Like, that would be amazing, right?
I mean, not amazing because I eat some fiber. I mean, I think we're all eating
most
some
people
fiber.
do, and that's the thing. Like, we're just if you question these things.
This is outside my wheelhouse, but this is interesting. I mean, I think it's worth further reading. Where, I think generally, I think we're clearly open minded here, having this conversation. Like me personally experimenting with it.
Do you know the original reasons why fiber is recommended?
I do not.
So there is this guy named Sylvester Graham in America, and he was like a Seventh-day Adventist, a Christian, kind of like a cult, like a smaller sect of Christianity. And they had this idea that there was a temperance. I guess there was a woman named Ellen G. White, and she had some dreams or visions, and basically thought that eating meat was like basically makes you horny, and then you're more likely to sin. So you should eat.
Which is probably true, right? Because you have all this protein, you elevate your testosterone.
It's definitely true. I mean, it makes people fertile.
Yeah.
And anyone who's had a keto baby knows that.
Yeah.
So Sylvester Graham, I guess he dies in 1851, and then this other guy was born in 1852 named Kellogg. I think Francis Kellogg.
The founder of Kellogg's.
The founder of Kellogg's. So he basically takes his advice and spreads out this fiber myth that eating lots of fiber, prevents your sexual urges. He had all sorts of weird ideas.
Was that the original text? Whoa, that's interesting. Yeah. And now it's being used as like...
And he was like recommending circumcisions and carbolic acid on clitorises to prevent like, masturbation, like it was just amazing. So there's basically a very deep religious ideology behind eating plants.
I can kind of buy it, where like that seeded some notion there, and then scientists and nutritionists were like, okay, let's actually prove out some additional data on this. And I don't think they're probably like religious fanatics that wanted to, reduce libido in the population, but I think, that seeded the notion of why this is helpful, and people wanted to confirm what was already there.
They created all these hospitals and nutrition centers, and they basically pushed out this idea. They would basically spread the church's message by spreading nutritional advice. And this woman named Elena Cooper in 1917 founded the American Dietetics Association. So the dietetics industry didn't exist before 1917, and then a vegetarian founded it.
Diabetics or dietetics?
Dietetics.
Okay, which what does that mean?
They're just focused on diet.
Okay,
it's like a nutritionist.
Dietetic. Okay, I was thinking
dietitian. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And now
I think I was getting confused like Dianetics, which is like some
Scientology
term.
No.
Like, is some Scientology getting converted in here too?
No, I haven't seen that yet. But there's like a deep vegetarian bias that is pushing plants and fiber onto most of the society. And a good woman to follow if you're interested more about this is Belinda Fettke, the wife of Gary Fettke, who's a surgeon in Tasmania, who was silenced because he was giving low carb nutrition advice to his patients, who would come in and say, like, I've got like an inflamed knee. And he's like, oh, well, I could do
kind of like Tim Noakes, but
yes, like Tim Noakes or like
banned.
Sean Baker. Yeah.
Okay.
And like they banned him, like they sent secret emails, and they're like, this guy is like doing low carb diets, and we can't let this like affect our industry.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's definitely worth investigating more into. I'm actually just curious. I want to just like drive it back towards things that you're actively seeing, and something that we can just sort of comment at firsthand here, where clearly the carnivore community is growing, getting a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading, the Guardian article
Yeah.
that probably like a year and a half ago was writing about fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, being quoted for that article, and then I literally just like fast forward. It's like the same kind of tone.
Did Olivia write that?
Probably.
Olivia Solon?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think so.
She called me and I did an article for one of the, I don't know, like back in February.
Yeah, for carnivory.
Yeah.
And I remember one of our community members, Lily, who is in the fast community also, was quoted in the Guardian article. And it's kind of the same,
Right.
I think, bemused, it kind of maybe a little bit dismissive, like confused, these guys are crazy people, kind of a tone. And I'm curious, like, how has it been from your lens, the growth of carnivory? Like, are you also the mod of Zero Carb, which is like a carnivore Reddit? Like,
yes.
How has that grown?
So I actually know a ton of back info on the growth of Zero Carb. And It's basically its entire history. So one of the main guys in the movement was this guy named The Bear. He was the sound guy for the Grateful Dead. And he did a zero carb diet for 53 years until he died of a car accident on LSD.
So zero carb is not necessarily
zero carb is
carnivore.
A carnivore diet.
So it means carnivore.
It was basically the diet name he gave it and called it, and then the carnivore community kind of adopted it because most people talk about low carb diets, keto and stuff, and then this is saying like play on words like what happens if you do zero carb? And that means zero fiber, zero sugar, zero grains. And then you're like, really what it means is zero plant. So like you really just eat animal products. And right now I think, I don't know what to call it. Like I like the zero carb terminology, but I also think it causes a lot of problems because when you say to someone, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, well, what do you eat? Like, oh, just meat. Like, okay.
I think carnivore is funny.
I think
like,
carnivore.
I'm a lion, carnivore.
Yeah, right.
It's obvious.
Yeah,
right?
I like it. It's obvious. It's in your face. It like makes a statement, and then it says like, "Wow, like, okay, you're really eating meat. You're serious." Whereas zero carb is like a play on words on the low carb community.
Okay, so this Bear guy,
the Bear, he writes all these blog posts on like these old forums, and they create this zero carb diet, and all these people start doing it. And then like 10 years ago, they started making Facebook groups. So one of the first ones was named Zeroing In on Health. This guy named Charles Washington runs it. And he's a marathon runner, and he's been doing a zero carb diet for 10 years. Really just eating muscle meat for 10 years.
Not even gut.
Yeah.
Awful.
So when I heard from Sean about zero carb carnivory, I joined all these Facebook groups, and I was curious, like, why A, there were more than one, and then B, like, what the message was.
Right.
And the idea really wasn't to like focus on keto. Don't worry about your macros. Don't do like pea strips and stuff. Just stop eating plants. Eat a lot of fatty red meat, and you'll figure it out. And it was just kind of like refreshing advice to hear compared to like the keto crowd, which is like very scientific and very like, like you always have to talk about which plants are acceptable on keto and which aren't.
I'm part of that, a guilty member of that, where I'm like, I'm finger sticking, measuring my ketone levels.
And it's like, oh man, just stop all that. Like just move on, And I heard about this fiber menace thing, and then once I questioned fiber, I was like, okay, I'm basically good to try at least carnivory. I experimented with it for a couple of weeks over the last year, like from like September to January. And then Sean Baker was on Joe Rogan in like November, and that blew it up.
You think that was the catalyst?
That was the catalyst, because Joe Rogan has millions of subscribers and a very interesting mix of people. And he went on there, and I knew that would blow up.
Were you a moderator at the time?
I was already a mod of Zero Carb.
And how big was it before and then after?
It had 10,000 subscribers last summer.
Okay.
And it has 50,000 now. So it went up 40,000 people.
Yeah.
In a year, which was amazing. So there were these Facebook groups. There's Zeroing In on Health, and then there's another one called Principia Carnivora. Zeroing In on Health is very blunt and direct. So some people go in there and they say like, oh, like I'm cutting out plants for the next like 3 weeks. People are like, get out of here. You're not in the diet. Like you need to just eat meat and water. So it has a very strict reputation.
Yeah.
And if you like that, you can stay in there. And then anyone who disagrees basically gets kicked
out. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't last. So I kind of like that, but then I also like was curious to ask deeper questions. So I joined Principia, and the mod there is named Michael Fries, and he has like he just wants good discussions, basically. You know, like he realizes people aren't always going to do it, and you're more or less mostly a carnivore, but you can ask like more deeper questions.
Yeah, I mean, understand it, right? That sounds reasonable.
But there wasn't really like a group that was all about newbies, like brand new people, brand new to the diet. But both these groups had people that have been doing it for 5 or 6 or 10 years.
And how did the subreddit come to creation? R/r zero carb.
I don't know when it was created.
But you came in as a mod. You were like, "Hey, I'm an experienced mod. I did keto science for a while. Let me be a mod at zero carb."
Right. I was like, "Yeah, I've been doing this. I can help you guys out. I can add some web, like help redesign it and stuff." Reddit has gone through a big changeover in their design of their website. So I've basically overhauled like 4 subreddits to use this new design. And adding in all this new flair and making it like really accessible and easy and hopefully pretty. Like, I don't know. I've kept changing keto science. I've changed the icon like 4 times in like the last couple months, and I think I'm finally happy with what I have now.
So modding zero carb and then
modding zero carb. Yeah. So I wrote this giant like intro post to him and all the other people that have basically talked about nutrition on Joe Rogan as like a opener. And I knew that he was going to be on this like a month in advance. So I like wrote up all these text things, and I wanted to like get people interested from keto and keto science and like other like the Joe Rogan subreddit and stuff, and be like, hey, this guy's going to be on. He's going to blow your mind. Yeah. And sure enough, he blew a lot of people's minds. The podcast is number 1050. Really recommend everyone watch it. Sean is like a really nice guy, and he's like, he really like, I think when you hear him, like you understand how honest he is and how afflicted he is by like the current status quo.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've watched most of that episode. Sean Baker's coming on?
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. I just remember just hearing him speak. I mean, he's just like, he's an older gentleman, probably in the 50s. 51. Jacked.
250 pounds, 6'5", and he's like breaking
setting like world records on the master's
rowing
level
machine.
For ergometer. And then what has the reception been since sort of like the breakout catalyst from Joe Rogan? I know that there's been discussion. I met a Fortune writer who wrote about the Bitcoin carnivores.
Safe Adian?
I think the creator of Zcash.
Yeah,
like
Zuko.
Zuko is like a famous
Zuko
carnivore.
Is the ex-husband of Amber L. O'Hearn.
Okay.
Who's been researching keto diets for 20 years. Okay. He's also like a computer science, works there, but has done her own research. Yeah. And she's been doing carnivore for like 8 years, I think. Yeah. And she has like a couple websites that are really useful. There's one with like a 30-day guide that was what I used to get into it.
Into keto?
Into carnivore. Okay. Yeah. To kind of like have the tools just to read it. There's actually a lot of good websites. There's one called Zero Carb Zen. This woman named Esme runs it, and she does really good interviews with like long-term zero carbers. Right. For someone to adopt this diet, a lot of times they really need like pretty bad problems. Like, I don't really have many problems that needed zero carb to fix. but a lot of people have really bad digestive issues. They are always constantly worried about having diarrhea that they can't control, or just autoimmune issues because
I mean,
inflammation all
I
the
don't
time.
discount their anecdotes, right? Like, if it's a pretty restrictive diet,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how they're making money if I'm eating carnivore. And
Yeah,
veg,
right. It's pretty.
So
free
it's like
advice.
if they're going and doing that and seeing good results, like there's this interesting signal there.
Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of like the RCT question, right? Like I think another big devil's advocate is, okay, great. Like there's some interesting signal here. Why aren't we studying this? Why aren't we doing randomized controlled trials?
Right.
I mean, I think there's a natural, I think we're starting to see that happen with keto. I think people are starting to do that now. Perhaps, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Are we just going to see that same kind of trajectory where it's going to sit around in the community and people are going to just adopt it, see good results, tell more and more stories until
I think it's going to be
more
pretty grassroots for a while.
Yeah.
But I think the community is also, we're backed up by keto science that like really shows the metabolic benefits of being keto and really makes us ask a question, like, what if we evolved in keto? What if keto is a natural state of humanity? And I think that's basically where I am now. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
I mean, it's an interesting thesis. Like that's outside my wheelhouse per se. But I don't think it's an unreasonable hypothesis to understand more about. I'm actually curious, are you tracking biomarkers now? Like,
me?
Are you doing
personally?
lipids from like after keto? So this is just pure subjective.
Yeah, pretty much purely subjective. Like I check my weight a lot, and I can fast basically for a day if I want. So I like being 154 pounds. Like I feel really good there, like in like this Zen like state.
Yeah.
And if I eat like a really big meal, I can go up to like 157, 159 even.
Right.
But then I might not eat for like a day or have a small meal or something.
Right.
And then I cycle back down.
Yeah.
I really think of my fat stores as like a battery that I can add more juice to if
you're just
meat
metabolically fat adapted, right?
Yeah,
you can actually just tap. I mean, I think
and
people that are fasting or eating standard keto, I mean, if you're 7 years into the experiment, you're very adapted to using your fat.
You have 40,000 calories of fat that you can burn, and it's not like you have to switch to burning it.
Yeah.
You can just use it right away.
Are there people in the community that are very biometric driven? Because I think part of how this is going to be more and more widely accepted is just people showing data, right? I think it's because I again, being a devil's advocate here, I could imagine that someone on a vegan diet would say, I feel awesome.
Yeah.
Trust me, I feel awesome. And you're like, cool. I don't have reason to not believe you.
But show me your blood work.
But show me some data. And then like
B12
I feel like, again, as scientists, as engineers, we'd be like, okay, there's something here.
I want to collect data. I want to do like an RCT on carnivore. I want to see kind of, well, like if you have groups of people doing keto with maybe zero carbs, but only fiber, maybe like a fiber supplementation, and then really see if fiber is useful or not when you just feed it to carnivores.
Yeah. Maybe
you could give them 50 grams of sugar and see how that affects them, if they can still stay in ketosis or whatever.
Right.
And then if there's like long-term nutrient deficiencies,
right,
which are, I think, much harder to measure. Like even vegans who like, they have like a 5-year store of vitamin B12. And then like after that, they really start getting sick.
Yeah.
And because there's like such a big delay there, they can feel healthy for a long time.
Right.
And then they're so in their zone that they can't escape it.
I mean, I think that's a good point. And I think that is, probably conflates some of the benefits of on either side. I think because like a vegan diet or a carnivore diet or even a keto diet are pretty restrictive. I think in general, you're probably just fixing your diet from like the standard Western diet by doing something that is like restrictive.
Yeah.
I think people are seeing a short-term bump just from cleaning out processed carbs, which
that's always my first message too. I make a lot of graphics for Twitter and stuff just because I like it.
Yeah. So I think I want to make sure I think the nuance here is like you're going to see a short-term bump by just being thoughtful about your food. And I think by just having a diet you're sticking to, you're going to just be more thoughtful. Yeah. And then from there, I agree with you. Okay. I think the downsides for vegan diets is you don't have essential amino acids that are primarily from whole proteins, which come from meat. I mean, it's much harder to have essential fatty acids. I mean, it's possible, right? But you got to be eating specific. I think you got to really get out of your way to try to eat.
Even the pills you eat aren't bioavailable. They need fats to be absorbed. So it's or they're anti-nutrients in plants that prevent absorption. So,
there's actually similar concerns for a carnivore. So, doing a little bit of research as I'm doing this carnivore experiment personally, a lot of people are eating liver, kidney,
organ
just sort of
meats,
the organ meats. Helped tease into it. So some of the concerns, are you going to get scurvy? Well, I think liver has a lot of vitamin C, right?
Well, so scurvy can be cured by fresh meat. And that was a factoid that Stephenson talked about in his book 100 years ago. But no one ever picked up on it. And the only message that survived was that citrus fruits and fruits are the only way to prevent scurvy, because they thought they were eating meat on these boats, but it was dried salt pork, that wasn't fresh.
So there's vitamin C in the blood.
I think there's a different form. It's like a collagen in fresh meat, and because you're not burning carbs, you need way less vitamin C. Okay. So one of the drawbacks of burning a lot of sugar is you need more vitamin C, and you pee out a lot of the vitamins that you eat, because the metabolic processes. So if you're on carnivore, you need far less of it, and what you get out of meat is good enough.
Yeah, I get it, right? Yeah. I mean, the reason, the British sailors called limeys is that it's probably a lot easier to store fresh or limes on a naval warship than having a bunch of cows, right? So I understand why.
They weren't even fishing though. They just have their prepackaged salted pork and bread or
so it stands
bread.
The reason why people focus on the citrus, because it's just not practical to eat fresh meat all the time when you're on a Navy warship. But today, now we have refrigeration, a lot of then we can actually probably do it.
But the vitamin C, I think it's one of the biggest scandals, because every fruit juice company is saying a great big source of vitamin C, but they're also saying you're eating 20 or 30 grams of sugar in every cup.
Yeah.
And if you're eating so much sugar, you're going to need a lot more vitamin C. Yeah. But if you don't have the sugar, then you don't need as much. Yeah. And they're basically selling sugar with the label of vitamin C. Yeah. It's just
But I do sense the community and the broader public is getting around to it. I think people start realizing that a lot of juices are equivalent to soft drinks. So that's at least what I sense.
It's not something I thought of it when I was a teenager and chugging.
Yeah, I know. I drank a lot of calcium enriched orange juice. That's what my mom bought for the house.
It was just delicious.
Yeah, Tropicana, calcium enriched orange juice.
I'll go upstairs and I'd get acid reflux at night, and I'd be why is this? I thought this was healthy.
Maybe to make this a little bit more actionable, what are some of the common pitfalls on carnivore for the listeners out there who are curious? I think, maybe to give you a sense and audience sense, been cycling in and out of keto, I would say fairly expert on understanding how to do this properly. Having done a ton of finger sticks and knowing all the methodology here. And I didn't find any reason to be skeptical around a carnivore diet. I would have no fears around a carnivore diet being harmful for me, especially on the short term. So it's okay, let's play around with this and see what it feels like. And obviously, just a few days in, I don't expect to see any massive changes, but it seems pretty similar to how I feel on a keto diet.
Yeah, I think it's very similar.
I haven't been measuring as much recently, but I imagine my ketones are elevated, feel fairly sharp, don't have really like the crashes of it being on an insulin carb cycle. I bought a bunch of ribeye steaks from Whole Foods and got my
$13.99 a pound.
The bone in is $12.99.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the bone in. I think anyways, this overly detailed here. Yeah, so I got my whole setup. So okay, I got some like ribeyes. I have some eggs. I got some like smoked salmon. What that's gonna carry me for at least a few days. But what are the other pitfalls or other considerations? What else should people be thinking about? I got some bacon. I haven't used it yet.
Big things are, I find most people eat 2 or 1 meal a day. So you pretty much always skip breakfast and then have like lunch or dinner.
Okay.
And basically have time restricted feeding. I call it intermittent feasting. So
opposite of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, you really try and eat like big meals, about a pound of meat per meal. I find most people eat 2 to 3 pounds of meat per day.
Okay.
So that usually is like a pound at lunch and then like a pound and a half for dinner.
Okay.
And most people like they start it and they think it's a diet and then they eat like the lean protein, chicken that they're used to, and then they're hungry and they feel crappy.
Right.
Because they're not getting enough fat.
Right.
I think people that have been in keto for a while are like much easier to convert because they're used to
it. Like I'm trying to eat some of the fatty cuts.
You're already thinking like fat is good. So, but people going from like standard American diet right to carnivore, which some people do, it's like a tough transition to say like, oh wow, I can actually eat like 4 patties. I went to McDonald's today. I got 6 patties.
Patties only,
quarter pounders, and I got like 3 cheddar cheeses, and just like it was delicious. I mean, I don't need a bun. I don't need ketchup. There's a lot of debate over like what spices are allowed, but I think most people use like cayenne, garlic, salt, and pepper, and then like some herbs and stuff. But really anything more than like a pinch is like discouraged.
How about organ meats? That's something I've been like looking, and it's like I'm down to eat some beef heart. I'm down to eat beef brain, but I don't know how to. Like I can't find. I need to figure out like a local butcher that has that stuff. Like I'm totally game, but I just don't have. I haven't figured out how to buy it yet.
Apparently, grass-fed liver is the tastiest.
Okay.
Whereas like grain-fed livers are basically trying to deal with all the sugar in the body, and they can't do it, and then they get sick and they get like fatty liver, and there's issues there.
Isn't foie gras great?
Yeah, that's like
but foie gras is fatty liver from a goose. That's delicious. Right. So
yeah, so they.
But I understand your point. It's like not a healthy liver.
There's a big, I guess, debate over whether organ meats are necessary.
Okay.
Some people swear by them. Other people haven't had them in 20 years.
Are you eating organ meats?
No.
They're just eating like ground beef and
steaks and fish and lamb. I love lamb. It's a nice gamey meat, but it also has great fat content, and it's almost always grass-fed.
Bacon.
What
kind of seafood?
Pork chops.
Like what? Clams, shellfish,
lobster,
like
crab, shrimp,
anything.
Wild salmon, some of the fish on sale at Whole Foods. I might try like halibut or cod or something. Just fry it up in butter. It's like the easiest meal.
Yeah,
I've done a bunch of polls, and so the big group I also mod is World Carnivore Tribe.
Yeah,
probably spend most time modding that. That's
How
on
big
Facebook.
Is that one? Oh,
that's now 18,000 members. So we started like right before the beginning of the year, 2018. And Sean had this idea. He's going to make January World Carnivore Month. And I was like, that's perfect. Like, I want to get people on this diet. I really think it can help cure a lot of problems. And I don't think it's going to kill you in 30 days. And if you can try it and enjoy it and get some good feedback out of it, it's going to spread. Yep. So I I joined that group, and Sean asked like, "Hey, we need some moderators for this group. Any takers?" And I applied and got in, and we've basically been the fastest growing carnivore group on Facebook. So to compare, zeroing in on health has 21,000. Principia has like 17 or 18,000. Maybe we just passed them. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So you did a poll. And
almost everyone that's in like World Carnivore Tribe is like fairly new carnivores. So they really haven't, they might have been doing keto for a while, but they're like new to the carnivore concept.
And then the polling in terms of organ meats, how does that sit?
I published like 14 or like 20 polls that I ran in the group over like the last year. I have a Reddit post on it, and organ meats, most people don't eat them. It's like, it's much more of a minority.
Like 10, 20%.
Yeah, it's a pretty small percentage. I think people think that they're necessary because they have more nutrients.
Yeah.
The question is like, do we really need more nutrients? And the other issue is recommended daily amounts have all been taken in just a couple people that were on high carb diets.
Right.
So how do we really know that like that amount of percentages of like all these different? So it's
I think there's already enough controversy aside from like carnivore on like
we need to make a new set of guidelines of like really what do we need. And I'm just still not very convinced that we need to eat organ meats.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe you're saying that maybe I'm overthinking it.
I think it is, and my message is if eating more organ meats is going to prevent you from doing carnivore, don't let that stop you.
Okay.
If you like them,
which didn't stop
try
me.
them
I'm
out.
Like, I'm not gonna die.
Yeah.
I know I've literally not eaten for 7 days.
Yeah.
So I did fasted for 7 days before and for multi-days. So I know that like I'll be okay if I just eat some steaks. I don't have any organ meat. So it's interesting to hear and good to hear that. It's not people have been not eating organ meats for quite some time.
So there's this guy named Joe Anderson. He's like 60 years old, I think today actually, or fairly recently, just turned 60. And he's been doing a carnivore diet for 20 years. And he basically figured out all this stuff on his own like 20 years ago. And his wife had all sorts of really crippling problems. And eventually they figured it out, and she was like one of the first meat heals stories. And she looks super lean now and really healthy and just like the perfect woman, and like, so they have 2 kids. One is 13 and one is 11. And these 2 boys have been raised on an all meat diet their whole life. And I think they've basically just been fed ribeyes for like 13 years.
It's a crazy experiment.
So I want to like hear more from these kids. The problem is Joe kind of got scared off by vegans like 10 years ago when this was all new. Yeah. And now that there's like a lot more publicity and kind of support, I think he could kind of be a really great voice for the community.
Yeah, it's an interesting experiment.
I love to.
This is like a crazy case study, like carnivore from birth. Like,
carnivore from birth, yeah. And like, that's what almost every Eskimo is doing anyway. So it's like.
So maybe as we sort of wrap the discussion here, like I'm convinced that a carnivore diet is sustainable for a reasonable health span. Where I have open question, and I think this is open science, is that, is this optimal? Or if it's optimal, what kinds of use cases is it optimal for?
Right.
So for example, it seems that for certain types of athletic events, like Ethiopians or East Africans on a super high carb diet seems to do well for that, for like the marathon distance events. There's interesting arguments that people that are keto are now doing endurance events just as well now. Yeah, but I think you get the point. That I'm actually curious: is there applications of carnivory that is optimal, more optimal than a keto or a vegan or a standard Western diet? And I think some of these stories will give us more and more case studies to show what signal there is.
Anyone that keto can help, carnivore can help too. Yeah, because it is keto.
Yeah,
and like. that myth that eating lots of protein kicks you out of keto isn't really true. I guess the glucagon like prevents that process from, crashing your
Glucagon
ketone.
releases glucose. It's the hormone. It's the opposite hormone of insulin.
Yeah, right.
So you're saying that glucagon, which releases glucose from your liver stores, what will
it like won't kick you out of ketosis like everyone says. Professor Benjamin Bickman.
I've spoken to him on the phone before.
He has a good talk on Low Carb Down Under that kind of debunks that myth.
Okay.
So, anyone who might be helped on keto, cancer, gout, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism.
I mean, I'm actually curious, like, are there stories where like people are feeling better than normal? I mean, like, besides the therapeutic use cases, which is like
beyond keto,
sick people to normal.
Yeah.
I'm actually just curious, like, especially within my personal interest, are people seeing like strength gains? I think some of the interesting things that Sean Baker seems to just personally embodies, like he's breaking world records as a carnivore. There's potentially
I think
like
it's hard to
overlap where
say.
you like are elevating testosterone production or growth hormone because you're eating so much protein and meat. I'm just wondering, is there that kind of sentiment in the community?
The overarching like sentiment I've seen is that carnivore is better than keto, but when it comes to measuring why, it's really hard to say. For one, like you have no carb cravings because you're not eating carbs, you're not eating plants, you're not eating any like junky like keto food that imitates real food, or like modern food.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think I'm skeptical about. It's actually like all the keto meal replacement stuff.
I mean, I understand why they exist.
I think there's a role.
Yeah.
There's a purpose for them, but I'm getting more and more skeptical about.
Yeah, it's
a lot of these. Yeah, again, going back to processed.
Right, and it's like, I just want to stick to meats. But now, like the new thing I've been studying is like digestive health and autoimmune issues. There's this called intestinal permeability, where your intestines basically are preventing most of the food from coming across these membranes into your bloodstream.
Like gut leaking.
Leaky gut.
Yeah.
But some of them are getting through because we've been inflaming our guts for so long. We're eating all this fiber, all these refined greens, and our digestive systems haven't adapted to handling all this.
Yeah.
So now I'm really trying to target autoimmune diseases, eczema, psoriasis, skin issues, and arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I've almost the biggest thing that people talk about a lot is joint pain goes completely away, back pain.
How about, that's, if that works for everyone, that'd be huge.
Yeah.
And the last topic I want to bring up is the media and environment. We touched upon it a little bit. I mean, where do you think this goes? What is it like being a spokesperson of the movement? Where do you think this goes? What do you think of the media attention around it? Are you amused by it's obviously kind of troll.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of troll. Like I think even with fasting, I knew it was like half like real science that is like there, and half kind of trolly.
Right.
I'm curious from how you kind of see it being in a similar spot.
I collected a bunch of articles that all talked about the carnivore diet. I mean, I've been in a couple of them, but there's a lot without me. I want writers to really think about like what convinced us to do this diet. Like I'm doing it because there are scientific reasons to do it. I'm really questioning most of the nutrition advice out there, and I think I have really good reasons to do that because I understand the history of why it happened. Like if you have like a scientific fact and then you debunk the original thing that created the fact, like you've debunked the fact. But because the fact was told repeatedly for 60 years, everyone believes it's true and nothing will change their mind. It's kind of like how the anti-vaccine thing happened, right? Like that one guy published a study, it was a fraud.
Yeah.
And then everyone latched onto it, and now it's like
A real thing.
a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the same thing
Or worse.
with fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
the same thing with high carb diets, low fat, all these issues. And they get ingrained in culture, and then everyone thinks they know what's going on. And honestly, I'm not surprised by the media. Like, I expect it. Things take time to change. Like, nothing gets changed in a year. There's no way like 80% of Americans will be eating a carnivore diet next year. It's like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We've been, Sean says he wants to get the carnivore group up to 100,000 people by next year. I think it's pushing it, but it will come down to the right media exposure. When someone really goes in and asks like, well, like, could this actually be healthy? And instead of asking like a plant-based dietitian that's going to say you need fiber for all these reasons that don't make any sense, like, ask paleoanthropologists, like, ask like, were humans really carnivores? Like, what evidence is there that we ate a lot of plants? Like, what evidence is there that we ate even 20% of our diet is plants?
Right.
And if there are like all these open questions that say like, well, I don't know, maybe humans did evolve as carnivores for 1.5 million years and only resorted to eating plants when they had famines or were starving or whatever, then I think that would really change the discussion. But everyone is basically going in like, oh, this diet is crazy and extreme.
I'm gonna characterize a
and
couple
wild,
kind of ridiculous people and troll them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, excited to keep experimenting with carnivore. I think it's personally fascinating. I think it's interesting implications and diet and nutrition broadly. So excited to keep track of the different communities in your work. So to wrap up here, where do people follow you, and what's the best way to keep track?
So I've become a big tweeter in the last 9 months. I never used Twitter before, and I never really understood the point. And now I follow all these doctors and scientists in the low carb movement, and then like 10% of them are kind of becoming carnivores, and now that's like the new thing. I think a lot of people are kind of bored with keto. Like yeah, we know it's true. We know it makes sense. We know it helps. Like, what's the next step? I mean, keto doesn't solve a lot of autoimmune issues. It still introduces all these plants into diets. We don't know for sure whether they're a good thing.
Yeah.
And now that I think there's good reasons to be skeptical that plants are really good for us. And so Twitter.
Is it at?
My Twitter at is Travis_Statham, Statham.
Okay.
I'm a moderator at R Keto Science on Reddit. So you do reddit.com/r, and then each subreddit is basically like a group dedicated to a certain topic. There's Keto Science and Zero Carb. I also just suggest looking at keto and seeing the amazing transformation stories there.
Yeah.
There's also a carnivore subreddit that has like only 1,000 subscribers, and definitely focus on the Zero Carb subreddit. It's way bigger and way better moderated, I guess. The carnivore one.
Of course, you're running it, so it's going to be better.
Sometimes, like people go on the carnivores thing and they're like, oh, there's only 600 people here. Like, what the heck? But Zero Carb is really like the secret name of carnivore.
Yeah.
And then you can find me in any of the 3 Facebook groups, Zeroing In on Health, Principia, but mostly at World Carnivore Tribe.
Yeah.
You can message me on Facebook. I've been getting a ton of friend requests since I was on Good Morning America, and I still haven't really decided if I'm just gonna accept everyone or not. And I guess that's it for social media.
Cool.
Yeah, I want to spread the movement out, and I'm willing to help anyone out if they have problems. So you can always ask me. I'm making tons of graphs and polls and graphics and diet charts and all these things. I made a big graphic of all the books that influenced me. to get here, and all the books that I know, at least, like if I read them, they kind of back up my points, or are on my reading list. I don't want anyone to look at this and think it's like completely crazy. Like, there really is good research. You just got to read it.
And I agree. Like, I wouldn't be doing it if I thought it was just complete, just diet gurus doing some crazy shit. I mean, something interesting. I'm excited to continue the experiment and learn more and get more conviction. Either way, I mean, clearly it's not gonna. I'm comfortable. That's not gonna be negative, and then it's like, okay, can this be positive?
Yeah. Be positive. I would like to see some more bad results from carnivore. It's a rare thing. I haven't seen that many. A lot of times, like, it's just comes down to like not having enough electrolytes or not eating enough, and most people seem to do really well on a carnivore diet. We know that seems to heal people, and it's not like a new idea. Like, it was employed by doctors in like the 40s and 50s. There's this guy named Blake Donaldson who employed it in his New York practice. William Banting did a low carb diet in 1864. They used to treat type 1 diabetics with a low carb diet in 1921 until they invented insulin like the next year.
I mean, check out like hashtag meat heals, right?
Yeah, check out hashtag meat heals. Go on meatheals.com and just read the stories. I know they're anecdotes, and I know everyone should question anecdotes, but these are some amazing things, and people have been getting really like amazing results compared to keto. And I'm honestly not really sure why. Like, maybe fiber really is as bad as it could be. You know, it might
or
be.
Or for certain subtypes of people,
and
right? Like, I think clearly a lot of science to be done, but and a lot of work to be done, but continue to do the good work of just educating people. I mean, I think that no matter what, I think should be just a part of open discourse, right? Like, you have an interesting point of view. You're bringing data to the conversation. You're challenging the existing dogma. I think that's just generally valuable, right? If that ends up being the wrong dogma, at least you're pushing people to have the true dogma to like have better counterpoints, and vice versa.
Right.
Maybe this is the true way to eat. I think that is yet to be written. So Travis, thanks so much for taking the time to drop in by.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, peace. We'd like to take a minute to congratulate Joey D for winning a 3-pack of HVMN ketone by completing the podcast survey and helping us improve the show. As a reminder, every month we send a 3-pack of our ketone ester to a new survey submission. The podcast survey can be found at go.hvmn.com/podcast survey. That's go.hvmn.com/podcast survey, one word, all lowercase. The link is also going to be in the show notes. If you haven't already, help us out, enter, and have a chance to win some HVMN ketone next month. Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in this week, everyone. As always, please send my producer Zil and I any feedback or topic or guest suggestions to podcast@hvmn.com. We read every single message and work really hard to make this program valuable and educational for you. Also, don't forget our ongoing special offer. By leaving a review on iTunes, you can get a 1-month supply of our new omega-3 product, Keto. Simply rate us with a written review on iTunes, screenshot it, and send it out to our email hotline. Again, that email is podcast@hvmn.com. Appreciate the love and support, and I'll see you again next week.